We continue now at the top of Daf Samech Beis and Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 69b. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought the Mishnah which said that if a person sells a field, it's not included in the sale the developed carob trees or the developed sycamore trees. And the Gemara says, Menohani Mili, from where do we know this? How do we know that these kinds of trees are not included in the sale of the field? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Diyamar Kra, because it says in the Pasuk, Vayokom stay Ephron Asher B'machpelah, talks about the sale of the field of Ephron to Avram Avinu. And we understand from that pasuk, Mishatzarech legvul saviv. The only things that are included within the sale are the kinds of trees that require a boundary around them, that they're not independently significant. Yatzu elu shein tzrichen legvul saviv. That excludes these kinds of trees which don't need a boundary around them. Again, they're significant independently, and therefore they're not included in the sale. And the Gemara says further, Amar of Mesharshia says, Mikan lemitzorim min haTorah. From here we understand the concept of boundaries from the Torah. And the Rashbam explains, Minohani Mili, from where do we know this? The Chorav HaMurka v'Sadan HaShikma, that the carob tree which is grafted, and the Sadan HaShikma, which again is the sycamore trunk, the more developed sycamore, Ein Nimkarin B'chlal Sada. How do we know that these are not sold within the sale of the field? V'kevan de Mashchichinan de Einan and if we understand that they're not part of the field, we understand the afiluim omar kol masha besocha. Says the Rashbam, even if the way you would phrase the sale is it includes everything within the field, ein on nimkarin, still we're going to say that these two kinds of trees would not be included in the sale. Kediktani masnisan, like it says in the Mishnah, bein kach uvein kach lo machar. In the Mishnah we say even if you say this added language, it doesn't necessarily include everything. Techol masha besocha lo mahani el tefuye tashmishe desada she'ein on kavun kol kach. That extra language, when a person says, I'm selling the field and everything within the field, that just comes to include things that are not so permanently established as being used in the field. Let's say you have reeds or stones that are not specifically designated for the use in that field, so that could be included if you have that added language. Because nevertheless, still they're ready to be used for that purpose. But when we're talking about the grafted carob tree or the Sadan HaShikma, the developed sycamore tree, Ashmi'in and Kra, the pasuk is teaching the Chashivi Sada B'fnei Atzman. The pasuk is teaching that they're considered like an independent field, like a separate field. Umisha Yesh Lo Gimel Sadas, for example, let's say a person has 3 fields. Umachar Shnayim Achitzonim, and he sells the 2 outer ones. V'yamar Lo Kol Masha B'Sochan Ani Mochalach. He says everything within the field I'm selling to you, everything within these fields. The Lo Machar Sada Hashlishi Shebeneim. That doesn't mean that he's selling that 3rd field that is between them. So Afkan, so too over here, Lo Machar Charav HaMurkav V'Sadan HaShikma. It's not going to be included in the sale, the Charav HaMurkav, the grafted carob tree again, and the developed sycamore tree. And the Rashbam continues, Dichsiv, because it's written in the pasuk, Vayokom stay Ephron, again talking about the sale of the field of Ephron. Ephron Machar Lo Hasada Li Avram, Bistama. Ephron sold this field to Avram generally, Kedichsiv Nasati Kesav Hasada V'Gomer, like it says in the pasuk, V'Kamahader Le Ephron Eretz Arba Meos V'Gomer, and Ephron responds to Avram, Ve'afilu Achikani Avram Kol Ho'ilanos. The point over here is that nevertheless, even though it was a stam sale, Avram acquired all of the trees. It says, it mentions the trees in the pasuk, through acquiring the field, he acquired also all of the trees. Now this pasuk of Asher B'chol Gevulo is it's extra words in the pasuk. The Matzi L'michta V'chol Eitz Asher Basada. It could have just said V'chol Eitz Asher Basada, meaning within the boundaries of the field, he gets all the trees. So we use these extra words in order to darshan as follows: Mishatzarech legvul osan ilanos kana. Those kind of trees that require a border, a boundary, those are the ones that he acquired. Shetzrichen lios lu gevul saviv. The ones that require a boundary, shelo ya'ar adam aleim lomar besoch shalin tuam. That nobody should protest and say that they're really planted within my property, v'shalihem, and they're really mine. Dahainu kagoni lanos dakim. The point is that's like the smaller kinds of trees, she'ein lahem shem, which don't have an independent name. V'hadavar shachuach min nitam, and we don't know exactly who planted them because they're so insignificant. Lafikach tzarech lasos lam gevul saviv. That's why you need to have a specific boundary around them. Avol kol charav hamurkav v'sadan hashikma. But when we're talking about these developed carob and sycamore trees, gedolim v'chashuvim, they're large, they're important. V'avshem el sayu v'yadu shalmi, and everybody knows who they belong to. U'v'karka mihenatu, and whose land they're planted in. Ve'in tzrichin gvul, they don't need a gvul. That's what it means. They don't need a boundary. Hilka Therefore, for that reason, they're not included as part of the field saviv that surrounds them, and that's why they're not included in the sale. And then the Gemara added, Amar of Misharshia says, Mikan lemitzarim min Torah. From here we see the idea of mitzarim, of boundaries from the Torah, which means shakones asad kones hamitzarim atzmon. One who purchases a field is going to purchase the boundaries as well. V'chol ilanos hanetuim b'meitzar demitzarim b'chlal sadeh. And all of the trees that are within these boundaries are included in the field. Means to say all the trees that are planted in the boundary that surrounds the field of Avram, those were also included. That's what Rav Misharshia means to say. The Rashbam says, this is what it appears in my eyes. This is what I believe is the explanation of Rav Misharshia. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Amar Rav Yehuda says, if somebody is selling land to his friend, he should write in there in the document of sale that also the buyer is acquiring these various kinds of palm trees. He should include the list of trees in the sale. Now, even though if he didn't write that, still the buyer would acquire the trees. Nevertheless, it is a betterment of the document. It's better to include it in the document so that there are no questions. And the Gemara continues, Amar Le, if he says to him, Aravidikli, let's say he says, I'm selling you land and palm trees. So Chazinan, so we have to see. Isle dikli, if he has palm trees, yoivle trade dikli, so then he gives him the two of the palm trees, because it's in plural, he has to give two. Lesle, now if he doesn't have any palm trees, zovinle trade dikli, so he has to buy for him two palm trees and give him two palm trees in addition to the land. Mishabdi, now let's say he has a situation where he does have palm trees, but they've been mortgaged to somebody else, so parikle trade dikli, so he has to redeem two of the palm trees in order to give it to the buyer. And the Gemara continues, Arabidically. Let's say the way he phrases it is, he says, land with palm trees I'm selling you. So Chazinan, so we have to see, Isbadically, if there are palm trees on this land. So Yoivli has to give him the palm trees. Vilav, and if not, Mekachto, so we have to say that it was a mistaken sale, because he sold him land with palm trees, but he doesn't have any land with palm trees, so there is no sale over here at all. And the Gemara continues, Arabedically. Let's say the way it's phrased is not Arabidically, but Arabedically. So the Gemara says, Lesle dically, so let's say if there are no palm trees on the land, but nevertheless it's a good sale. Why? Because you can interpret Arabedically as meaning it's land that is fit to have palm trees, and therefore this land is in fact fit for palm trees, even though it doesn't have any, so it is a good sale. And the Gemara continues, Amarle, let's say he says to him, Levar midikla planya, he says, I'm selling you the land, but not this particular palm tree. The Gemara says, Chazina, we have to see. Idikla tavu, let's say this is a good palm tree, it's good quality, so then shiure shairu, we assume he actually just left off this particular tree, and that's what he left off, that's all he left off. Idikla bishu, now let's say this tree is of an inferior quality, so then we have to say, kol shekain hanach, what he means to say is, I'm keeping this tree, and for sure the other trees, which are even better quality, he doesn't only mean to keep this tree, the seller wants to retain the other trees as well, which are better quality than this particular tree. And the Gemara continues, Amar Le, if he says to him, Lebar me ilone, if he says, I'm selling you the field, but not the trees, with the exception of the trees, so isle iloni, let's say if there are trees on the land, Levar me iloni, it means that he's keeping the trees, the seller is keeping the trees for himself, those are excluded from the sale. Isle dikli, let's say there are some palm trees on the field, Levar me dikli, that's what it means, we interpret the word ilone to mean dikli, it means to say the palm trees. Isle gufne, let's say it's a situation where he has vines, that's what's on the field, Levar me gufne, so when he says Levar me iloni, he really means Levar me gufne, he means with the exception of the vines, he's keeping those for himself. Ilone vigufne, now let's say the field has both trees and vines, so now we have to interpret what does Levar me iloni mean. It means to say Levar me iloni, it means to say not the trees. We assume the gafanim, we assume the vines are included in the sale, he really just meant to exclude the trees. Iloni vidikle, similar, let's say there are trees and palm trees, so then Levar me iloni, we assume it excluded those other trees, not the palm trees. Gufne vidikli. Now let's say the field has both vines and palm trees, so which one of those two is considered ilone, is considered more like just regular trees? The answer is levar mi gufne. He means to say with the exception of the gufne of the vines, that would be considered the ilone more than the dikle. And the Rashbam explains, again, Rav Yehuda said it's better to write the trees into the document to say they're included in the sale, and the Rashbam says dikle is shagalu called tzarchen, dikle is the palm trees that are fully grown, talin, sheselin, and toim bechurim. The te'elin refers to the ones that were just planted, hutzin, vitzit, tzitzin gam heim mine dekalim. Hutzin and tzitzin are also a kind of palm tree. Kedetnan, like we learned in the Mishnah in Meseches Sukkah. And the Rashbam also says, v'yesh mefarshim, some explain she'ein elu toan and peiros, that the hutzin and the tzitzin, they don't have any produce. That's what's unique about the hutzin and the tzitzin. And the Rashbam continues, v'yaf agav dechilo kasav lehachikani. Now, even though if you don't write this, still the person does acquire these trees. Kedetnan, like we learned in the Mishnah, hamocher sasad estam mocher chorav she'eino murkov uv'sulas hashikma. It says in the Mishnah that if you sell a field, included in that will be the undeveloped carob tree and the undeveloped sycamore. The kol shekein sharilon, certainly other trees are included. Only the more developed carob and sycamore trees are excluded in the Mishnah. But nevertheless, the Gemara said, Shufr de shtara, yifoy koach hashtar. It's better if you include these in the shtar. Dafilo yasu lifnei bezdin toin. That way, even if they come in front of a court that doesn't know the halacha that makes the mistake, yohavi le sharei mefurashim b'soch hashtar. Still, they'll give him the trees because they're included within the shtar. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav, Rav says, Kol she'olin lo b'chevel, any tree which in order to climb the tree you need to use a rope, have a shiur, that tree would be left out of the sale. Kol she'ein olin lo b'chevel, but any tree that you can climb without a rope, lo have a shiur, that is not left out of the sale. And the Rashbam explains, Hachi Garcina Amar Rav, Kol she'olin ule elkai, this is going on the Gemara right before. Hey chadamar le levar me'ilani, in a case where the seller says that I'm selling the field but not the trees, v'kam afarish Rav, so Rav is explaining, Elu heini lonos sheshayir, what kind of trees are being left out of the sale. Shem ketanim hein harbe lo mikri ilani. If they're very small, they're not called trees, and they actually are included in the sale. And again, kol she'olin lo bechevel, if you climb it with a rope, lalaket peirosav, in order to collect its produce, chashav ilan, that's considered a tree that's left out of the sale. Uvedekel mayri, and we are talking about a palm tree, kedemefarish lakamei, as will be explained as we go on. Shagavoa harbe, the palm trees are very tall. Upeirosav berosho, and the produce is at the top of the palm tree. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Amud Aleph.